County Board of Education special call meeting to order. We do have a number of board members joining us remotely, so I would like to start for the record with a roll call of board members. Board Member Dunton. Here. Board Member Thomas Bullock. Board Member Lamb. Here. Board Member Sharp. Board Member Jenkins.
Here.
Board Member Edwards.
Edwards is here.
Board Member Gray. Board Member E. Bullock.
Here.
Dr. Chavis.
Here.
Board Member Bissett.
Here.
All right, and I am present. Form established. Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All right, motion was made by Board Member Bissett, properly seconded by Board Member Dunton. First item on the agenda is the National Community College Board of Trustees appointment. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to renew Mr. Marshburn. Motion has been made by Board Member Dunton, seconded by Board Member Lamb. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please let it be known by the sign of aye, and we will have to do a roll call vote, please. Dunton?
Yes.
Thomas Bullock? Lamb?
Yes.
Sharp? Jenkins? Jenkins? Edward?
Yes.
Gray? E. Bullock?
Yes.
Dr. Chavis?
Yes.
Bissett?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Motion carried. Next up, we have Mr. Plyler, the Admentum purchase order. Hopefully, everyone has had a chance to review all the contracts that are on today's agenda.
Good afternoon, Dr. Ellis, Board Chair Dr. Washington, and other board members. Today, I want to talk just briefly about the admin purchase order for Exact Path. It's a renewing of that program that we've continued to use with math and ELA in grades K-8. Students take 3 diagnostics through the year, and after those diagnostics, they receive a learning path that helps fill skill gaps and help them be more prepared within the classroom. The superintendent requests approval of the current purchase order for Admentum Exact Path in the amount of $152,728.12. This is a purchase order that does have an opt-out clause. So at the end of this year, if we decide we don't want to continue, we have the option to do that. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Plyler. Is there a motion to approve the Admentum purchase order?
So moved.
All right, so the motion was made by Board Member Lamb, seconded by Board Member Dunton for the record. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Motion carried. Public impact contract, Discovery Education invoice, Ms. Nancy Smith.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I couldn't find my unmute button. That probably should have been a roll call vote, given that we're virtual.
Gotcha, no worries. Admentum, we're backing up to item number 4. If I could please do a roll call vote for the Admentum purchase order, please. Board Member Dunton.
Yes.
Board Member Thomas Bullock. Board Member Lamb.
Yes.
Board Member Sharp. Board Member Jenkins. Board Member Edwards.
Yes.
Board Member Gray. Board Member E. Bullock.
Yes.
Dr. Chavis.
Yes.
Board Member Bissett.
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Thank you, council. All right, now we can move on. Ms. Nancy Smith.
Good afternoon, Dr. Washington's in-person board members and those members joining us virtually. About 2 years ago, I stood in front of you and I shared that Nash County Public Schools had written a competitive grant, and we were awarded the competitive grant. As a part of the application process, we were asked to partner with the vendor to help us create our advanced teaching roles. We partnered with Public Impact. It is now time to renew our contract with Public Impact for the amount of $230,556. The superintendent recommends approval of the Public Impact contract.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept approve it, the public impact contract?
So moved.
All right, so the motion was made by Dr. Chavis, seconded by Board Member Dunton. Is there
Discussion.
any discussion?
Yes, please.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Edwards.
Just real quick. You said is this still a grant?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will roll call vote. Board Member Dunton,
Yes.
Board Member Thomas Bullock, Board Member Lamb,
Yes.
Board Member Sharp, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
Board Member Edwards,
Yes.
Board Member Gray, Board Member E. Bullock,
Yes.
Dr. Chavis,
Yes.
Board Member Bissett,
Yes.
and I am a yes as for the record. Thank you. Discovery Education invoice, Ms. Nancy Smith.
Yes, last month I stood in front of you, maybe it was the beginning of this month, and we talked about new instructional core resources for our secondary schools. At that time, it was shared that we will not adopt new resources for science because the standards change next school year. So this is a recurring purchase for the science textbook that is used in grades K-12. The superintendent recommends the approval of the Discovery Education purchase agreement to use the science textbook as our core instructional resource district-wide in grades K-12 for the amount of $152,728.13.
Thank you, Ms. Nancy Smith. Is there a motion to approve the Discovery Education invoice for approval? All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion was made by Mr. Lamb, seconded by Dr. Chavis. Is there any discussion?
Just
None?
real briefly, I'm sorry. So, and this is the same thing for admin. Is there not a contract for this stuff? I mean, are there not contracts for these?
No, in the past, we have not generated contracts for Discovery Education or for Edmentum. We've had purchase agreements for both.
Okay, I've got an email string with Chad where we were doing a contract previously, but if that's what you're saying you've been using.
We use two components of Edmentum. One is courseware for our virtual learning opportunities, and one is for Exact Path. I do think that Mr. Plyler shared that this purchase agreement is for Exact Path and not for Ed Options or the digital courseware that we use for our virtual academy.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, is there?
Should there be a contract, Rod?
I mean, there's a lot of standard terms that you would normally put in these agreements. They are referencing their documents only, which probably has terms in them that we don't normally like. But if what she's saying is that this has been the practice, then I don't want to make this overly complicated, today, but maybe we just need to look at this going forward. I don't want to make it overly complicated. I thought that we had done a contract for ad minimum for either you guys or some of our other clients, and I remember Steve Rawson working on that with Chad a couple of years ago, but again, I may just be mistaken.
And Mr. Malone, I think that was before we added Exact Path. So when we added Exact Path, working with the funding source, we just generated a purchase agreement for Exact Path. Now, we do have a contract for the online courseware, but I'll definitely go back and look at the contracts to make sure Exact Path was included.
That's just an add-on to the contract of coursework.
We can't hear those remarks that were just made. Oh, I couldn't. Couldn't either.
So the conversation was, we wanted to be sure Mr. Malone understood that this is just a supplemental component to the master contract that we have.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that's what it says, but again, I mean, maybe, maybe it makes sense to, like, some boards sometimes approve documents subject to, reviewing the final terms, in a manner acceptable to the superintendent and the attorney. I mean, that may be the easiest way to move this along without having to slow it down. I am, it's hard for me to answer without going through my
The
notes.
documents are in assembly, Mr. Malone.
No, I mean, I'm looking at them in assembly, and that's why I'm questioning whether.
And Mr. Malone, as a point of clarification, last month when we brought Great Minds, Wit and Wisdom, because we were purchasing textbooks, we did not generate a contract. It was a purchase order or a purchase agreement. So we followed that same practice because this is a science tech book and it's separate from Edmentum, which is the online courseware where we actually have teachers from across the district as well as Edmentum to teach our middle school and high school students.
I
have a
don't
question.
have anything further to say. I mean, I would have expected there to be a contract, but I defer to the board on how to proceed.
What's your recommendation, Mr. Malone? Are we proceeding legitimately, or do we need to hold off on this item?
I mean, I would just, again, to avoid it having to come back to the board, I would certainly be comfortable with approving both of these, subject to reviewing whether or not a contract's necessary and appropriate, and if so, to authorize, the superintendent to approve it. I mean, again, I'm looking on our system, and we had done contracts for Discovery Education. We've done contracts for Edmentum. Now, I can't say for sure that I know exactly that for the specific service or product that is being purchased here that we've done such a contract, but I'm looking, and it does appear that for some of our other clients anyway, we have done kind of using the school system's kind of form service agreement and or purchase agreement, that we've done contracts that these vendors have approved.
Question.
Go ahead, Mr. Short.
Ms. Dancy Smith, in your expertise, is this compatible to what you normally do? From a contract side to an agreement side, or however you classify this, I sort of tend to sort of think on the same line as Rob Malone. We got to be consistent in what we do. So I
Ye-
just need to hear from your perspective,
Yes.
what your thoughts are on that.
From my perspective, since it's a recurring purchase that we have done in the past, and again, I do want to share, it is no different from what we did with Great Minds last month. We had a contract with them as well. But last month, we brought a purchase agreement to the board to purchase recurring materials that were covered in the contract. But I will do whatever I'm advised to do by the board. So if the board would prefer I have a one-year contract, I will certainly do that.
I have a question.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mr. Sharp.
I think for the sake of consistency, because we need to be consistent in what we do, we may need a contract.
Well, so, and again, I'm looking, and I don't know, I guess I was at the last meeting, so I'm not sure how I missed this, but when I look on our system, it looks as though we've negotiated various contracts or the school systems have negotiated various contracts for Great Minds. It looks like we actually did one for you guys in 2019. I see Great Minds, Rocky Mount purchase and sales agreement. So I can't. I think the easiest option would be for the board to approve it, subject to review of whether a contract's necessary, and to just authorize the superintendent and the board chair to execute any contract if one is deemed necessary, or to supplement what's already here. I think would be the cleanest thing today. That way we don't have to come back to the board. The dollar amounts aren't going to change. The nature of the arrangement's not going to change. It's just whether we need a different document to document the purchase.
So it appears we're not buying books. It appears we're buying software. Correct?
It is software, but they are
Okay.
science tech books. That's really the same with Great Minds. The only difference is with Great Minds, we have print material as well as digital material for students.
So I think what I'm reading here is it is a service we're paying for the use of a digital content.
That's correct.
I think to move this along, I like what Rod says, our attorney. I think are we looking for a motion here, Madam Chair?
No, Mr. Bishop, we have a motion on the floor. We just needed the language clarified. It sounds like in the motion. Who made it? Somebody. Mr. Lamb made the motion already. So is there a second to proceed?
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
may I suggest that listening to the conversation, it seems like the administration and the attorney needs to have a conversation to discuss what has been done in the past and what needs to be done in the future. But to move this on today, I move that we add to the motion an amendment that says pending attorney approval, so that we can move on with this issue today.
All right, is there a second for the amended motion?
Second.
All right, it was made by board member Eagle, seconded by board member Dr. Chavis, excuse me.
Madam
Is
Chair.
there any further discussion?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I thought Mr. Lamb already had a motion on the floor.
Right.
Motion was amended, sir.
By Mr. Lamb, it wasn't.
He has to
That's
approve the amendment.
That's, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Record is correct. All right, is there any discussion?
My discussion is, does that mean we're waiting on our conversation with lawyers about this contract or this?
So,
Because that's
Yes.
on the thing. Are we voting to move forward and then we talk to Mr. Malone? I think we need to move forward, talk with Malone. Now, because if this is consistent with what we've been doing, this is gonna change the thing. So,
I understand that. But I think to move this along, because we could be going back and forth all afternoon. I think in order to get this moved along, the motion with the amendment added to it would clear us for today with the attorney looking at it, because evidently there are some thoughts and processes that have not been brought out as yet, but perhaps the administration and the attorney could settle this offline and we can move on. Because this could go on all afternoon.
that clarifies it for me.
Very good. All right, is there any further discussion before we conduct our roll call vote? All right. Board Member Dunton?
Yes.
Board Member Thomas Bullock? Board Member Lamb?
Yes.
Board Member Sharp? Board Member Jenkins?
Yes.
Yes, for sure.
Edwards?
Edwards is a yes.
Okay. Gray? E. Bullock?
Yes.
Dr. Chavis?
Yes.
Board Member Bissett?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well for the record. Thank you. All right.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Anderson. Moving on to agenda item number 7, Mr. Thompson, field trip.
Good afternoon, board. We have one additional June field trip. It was a competition that came in a little later for Southern Nash High School's FFA for state competition. And it is an overnight trip in Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the field trip.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Board Member Dunton, seconded by Dr. Chavis. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll conduct a roll call vote. Board Member Dunton?
Yes.
Thomas Bullock? Lamb?
Yes.
Board Member Sharp?
Yes.
Board Member Jenkins?
Yes.
Edwards?
Edwards is yes.
Thank you. Gray? E. Bullock?
Yes.
Dr. Chavis?
Yes.
Bissett?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Very good. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. North Carolina prayer certification and set of federal assurances, Ms. Morris.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Ellis. Submission of our consolidated federal grants requires that the Board of Education confirm acceptance of 2 items. That is our prayer certification and our federal assurances. The prayer certification indicates that no LEA policy will prevent or deny participation in constitutionally protected prayer in our public schools. And then the federal assurances, the LEA is certifying that we will administer each federal program according to our statutes. We will cooperate in carrying out any evaluation conducted by DPI, and we will use fiscal control and accountability, our accounting procedures to ensure proper accounting of federal funds. With your approval, we will ask Dr. Ellis to sign these certifications as of today.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Board Member Sharp, seconded by Board Member E. Bullock. Is there any discussion?
Discussion.
Go ahead, Mr. Edwards.
So we can pray.
Yes, it's allowable.
Wonderful news. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and conduct the roll call. Board Member Dunton?
Yes.
Thomas Bullock? Lamb?
Yes.
Sharp?
Yes.
Jenkins?
Yes.
Edwards?
Most definitely.
All right. Gray? E. Bullock?
Yes.
Dr. Chavis?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Bissett?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. Motion carried. Thank you. Northern Nashville House bid, Ms. Miller.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm reaching out for an approval on the request to accept the bid that was sent out about 30 plus days ago to execute the contract to begin the new construction. The fiscal implications are listed below. The low bid would be awarded, and it was 4.7. That was with all the extra incentives in with the bid. Nash County committed the 3 million. That leaves 1.7 with the sale of several of the properties and the grant project. That totals 1.2 on our end, leaves a balance of around 500,000. And we are looking to use our capital fund balance.
Make a motion to accept the bid for the overland.
Second.
Motion was made by Board Member Lamb, seconded by Board Member Dunton. Is there any discussion?
Yes, ma'am. Miss
Go ahead,
Miller,
Mr. Carter.
Yes, sir.
Miss, how are we with communicating this to our community as far as the status, the update of what's going on with that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the what?
How are we with communicating the status to the community as far as this project? I know there's been a lot of questions asked about this thing, and when do we anticipate breaking ground?
Once we have the contract in place, we should be breaking ground before September. And we will be meeting with the administration to advise them at that point. So they
So
can.
have we I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can we forecast projected completion date?
Great question. Not 100% sure that we would be complete by the end of next football season, but it would be very close. That is, if we meet the 60-day, we got to get in our information and our contract by the 60 days from the bid itself, bid opening. Which
Thank
is
you
why
very
we brought
much.
it today.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Yes,
So
sir.
we're using capital fund balance. How much do we have in that account right now?
Between 500,000 and 600,000.
Between 500,000 and 600,000.
It's what's in the account now.
Yes,
So
sir.
we would deplete that account with this purchase.
Yes, sir. We would be very close. There are some options that we have if we move forward and had a catastrophic event, but yes, sir.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think it wise, or should we think it wise to deplete or just about deplete our capital fund balance? That doesn't seem like such a wise decision to me. And secondly, I don't like the thought of using the funding from the sale of these buildings, school buildings that we have, to put all of that money in one project. I don't think that's fair to the other schools in the district.
Point of question.
Yes,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Sharp.
I think it would behoove us, Dr. Ellis, if we could have our financial group to actually break out at some point in time our fund balances, the different fund balances. So we'll see exactly where we are with all the fund balances, because I hear what's going on as far as depleting that fund balance. I just want to make sure that we're not confused with the other fund balance as well. Thank you.
We still have the possibility of selling Cedar Grove and Swift Creek.
I can't hear that.
Mr. Lamb.
You had the possibility of the selling of Cedar Grove and Swift Creek property down the road. And Green.
What was his comment concerning Swift Creek?
The
I think
selling of those three properties is what Mr. Lamb was referring to. The two schools were closing, and I was referring to Green, which is sitting over there now.
That will be funding that will be going towards back into that fund balance, correct?
That's what we're thinking.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have a question regarding Mr. Sharp's statement, what additional fund balances was referred to? Is it just capital or what is
I'm
he?
gonna let Doug speak to this, but in layman's term, we have fund balances in other areas.
That's right.
But if we were to push other funds into capital outlay budget, which is what Ms. Miller is referencing, we would just have to get that approved and then we could push that money over in case of something that happened and we needed to access that money.
And Dr. Ellis, that's why I wanted to make sure that the colleagues were familiar with the different fund balances and not misinterpreting this. There was only, we're depleting a fund balance. Because I think in the general fund balance, we have a substantial amount, close to $5 million. I don't know the number, but Doug can talk to that. But that's why I wanted you to talk to that information.
Can I let Mr. Hill?
I don't have the exact fund balance amount for capital outlay, but I will say it's somewhere around $550,000, maybe a little more, 567. Those numbers come to mind. Our current expense fund balance, unappropriated, undesignated, is about $8.5 million.
Thank you, sir.
Can I comment?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Malone.
So I just want to make sure everybody is aware that you cannot transfer money into or out of capital outlay without the county commissioner's approval. And
That's correct.
And during the year, it can only be for an emergency. So you won't be able to move money into or out of capital outlay unless it's an emergency.
Right.
And that's why I think we talked about, I think Frank was talking about the sale of those other properties. That would be money that would go in towards that capital fund balance.
Mr. Malone, can you clarify, please? So proceeds may go in there. You're only speaking to transfers, correct?
Correct. Yeah, you can, if you were to sell a property, those funds have to be used for one of two purposes, either to pay off indebtedness that the county has incurred, or it goes into your capital outlay fund. Those are the only two uses for those funds, but you cannot move money from your current expense fund balance into capital outlay unless it's an emergency.
Thank you. All right. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion. I think we have one on the floor in a second. Any further discussion before we take our roll call vote? All right, Mr. Dunton?
Yes.
Thomas Bullock? Lamb?
Yes.
Sharp?
Yes.
Jenkins?
Yes.
Edwards?
No.
Gray? Bullock? Bullock, I'm sorry. Dr. Chavis?
Yes,
Bullock, I'm sorry, no.
Dr. Chavis?
yes.
Bissett?
Yes.
And I'm a no.
One other comment real briefly.
Go ahead.
There's not a contract attached to the materials. Is the motion authorizing the execution of a contract, or just approving the project conceptually, and the contract will come back to the board for approval after there's a contract?
Approval for the bid, which we had to do within the 60 days of the bid opening, and the execution of the contract, which I can bring back to the board. If I just rolled it all into one so we could move forward before we have another.
Mr. Malone,
Yes.
real quick, we had a discussion, our committee, well, actually, we were talking through this thing, and the reasons, as Angela said, so eloquently stated, we want to present it to the board early enough before this thing's expired. So basically, with that said, at our next board meeting, I think, Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, it would have been a little bit late.
Yes, sir. It was past the 60 days of the bid opening.
Yes, sir. So that's why we wanted to bring that today. Thank you.
Right, but so the question for the board or for the administration is, and I don't know what contract documents were included in the bid package. I am assuming for now that they would have used our form contract documents in the bid package. I'm just asking whether the motion it's unclear whether the motion was approving kind of going forward with the project in terms of moving the money around or allocating these funds, or whether you were also seeking for approval for the board to enter into a contract. And if that's the case, then the motion, you may need a second motion authorizing entering into the actual construction contract, because I don't think it's certainly not, it wasn't clear from the motion anyway.
Okay, so let's begin clarifying the original motion.
The original motion was, I'm sorry. No, the request was for the bid and as well to move forward with the contract.
In that case, Ms. Malone, is the clarification okay for the record?
I mean, I don't remember the motion including the contract, but if it.
Okay, so no worries. I like clean records. Mr. Lamb, would you please restate the motion, including the contract?
Accept the bid, yield, on the match, feel that.
And execute the contract.
Execute the contract.
Including the contract.
All right.
Second.
All right. Motion was made again by Mr. Lamb, seconded as revised by Board Member Dunton. Roll call vote, just for clarification.
Question, can I ask a question before we vote?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Any discussion?
So-
Go ahead.
So if we're executing a contract, Rod, have you seen and approved this contract?
No, that's what I'm saying. There's nothing attached. So
Okay.
I would like for this motion to be similar to the earlier motion. Again, there theoretically would have been a contract included in the bid documents, which in working with this architect in the past, I'm assuming that she would have used our form agreement. So I'm not overly concerned, but I do think that is what I would like the ability to confirm was used.
I'd feel comfortable before I spend $4 million+ that you looked at the paperwork.
So would I.
I would too.
And that hasn't, I mean, so it's come before us and no, you haven't seen the contract. That's not good.
Well, and I'm going to chime in here. It's probably too late for this chiming, but I'm just wondering how come the board didn't have processes in place like we did for building the school. I mean, this is pretty substantial spending. So a whole nother building. There's a whole nother, well, I can't say another architect, but I don't even know who's done what. Last time we were pretty much informed and we had a committee in place that dealt with the building. And this time it just seems like it's an offshot. Somebody just shot in the dark with this one. I know the school system in itself has done its work. I'm sure the superintendent and all those folks there have done their piece. I'm not knocking y'all, I promise. But as a board member, I know nothing about this except what I got in the, what little bit we got in the past few weeks. So I'm just I'm at a loss of words for this one.
And Mr. Edwards, it may have been that I misworded because the direction that I was given per some of the past paperwork, and there's been quite a bit of transition, that once the bid was approved, that we would move forward with the contract. So that, my apologies if that was my misunderstanding, that they would both be approved at the same time, because they're not going to generate the final version of the contract, which would come back to the board for all signatures once the bid was approved. I was just instructed that it was typically brought in as a package, like the bid and the contract, but it certainly will come back. Once the contract is all generated, we couldn't go any further without the bid being approved within that timeline.
No, and I totally understand. That's how come I say I'm not knocking you. I'm not knocking the superintendent. I'm not knocking anybody. What I'm knocking was the process, in that when we built Red Oak, there was communication ahead of time. Contractors came in, they gave their proposals. We had things laid out. We were very well informed. On this one, this is what we got.
We did this 2 years ago, when we started this process.
Yeah, that's 2 years
Well,
ago, but
Okay,
now
okay,
it's
hang
just
on,
kind of
hang on.
like,
Mr. Edwards, let me finish. So what
but
we
hold
did-
on, wait a minute. I
Go
was
ahead.
talking first, Mr. Superintendent,
I'm just
and I
trying to-
apologize, but I'd like to finish. I hate the middle of my sentence
thought you
interrupted
did.
the
I'm
beginning of
sorry. Go ahead.
yours. But
ahead.
all I'm saying is that, yeah, that was 2 years ago, but here recent, we're talking about something now. And we don't feel like we were really communicated with, because all of a sudden now we're getting thrown in our lap how we're $500,000 behind, how to figure that out. And even Rod's got comments or questions about contracts and everything else. I just feel like there would have been a better process for this if we had been able to communicate, maybe had a committee in place, had people present to us, the board, instead of just the school system. Probably we'd all feel a little bit better.
Thank you, Mr. Elwood. All right.
So we did the bid process 2 years ago after we spoke to county commissioners about them giving us the money. We didn't have the money at the time, so we brought the board suggestions, then we stopped it because I believe the bid came too high when we had the process here. But that was 2 years ago too. So then we started putting it in all the budget talks when we did our PowerPoints to the county commissioners. So I don't know what other we didn't do. I'm trying to figure out if there was a committee.
We had a new bid opening
Right.
and it was here at central office.
Right. So the bid process was open again for anyone to come and see. So I don't know. I know we wanted to get this done within the 60 days because we'd have to rebid it again. Rod, if you want us to change that, we will, and we'll do a different process, Mr. Edwards, and we'll do what I don't know. I think we've been doing it for 2 years, so I'm at a loss. So you tell me what we.
So, question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Sharp.
Mr. Jenkins, are you online? Ricky Jenkins. Is he still here?
Yeah.
So, Mr. Jenkins, you've been pushing this project, we've been having this project for a long time. What's your thoughts? What's your comments on the conversation around this project?
I'm scared if we go out, if we have to throw this thing out for another bid, it's going to be a lot higher than it is right now.
How long have we been working through this project?
I can barely hear you, Bill.
How long have we been working on this project?
Ever
We're
since
talking about this project.
Ever since we started Red Oak Elementary, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so too. We started this about, as Dr. Ellis said, about 2 years ago, and it's been communicated to the board on a regular basis. And I think the only thing that we're standing now is the point that the contract itself, the discrepancy as far as is there a contract available? And Angie, this is where you can talk to a little bit better, I think. You're just trying to communicate to the board. We've actually did your due diligence. You brought to the board on a regular basis, updated not only but the board with the county commissioners as well, when we had our reviews with the county commissioners as far as the status and update. Now we're to a point that you need to get some resolution because your 60-day expiration is about to expire.
Yes, sir. And my understanding, Mr. Malone, maybe you can help me with this. Our original bid was past the timeline. It was a comfortable timeline because it was 2 years. So your suggestion was for us to rebid it out, which is why that took place before Shannon even left. The bidding process was opened. We had, I think, 7 bid companies that came in. And then at that point, it was awarded to the lowest bid. We did hold on to that because at that point, I didn't feel comfortable speaking to it. And I didn't feel comfortable having a good grasp of the budget. So we've been meeting to make sure that we could still meet the guidelines that were in place even 2 years ago up to now. So we did rebid it out with the low bidder able to hold his numbers for 60 days. Typically it's 30, he extended to 60, and we would even go past the 60 days if we waited to the August meeting, which is why I brought the bid piece to you. And as I said, we have not generated a contract yet. It will still come back to the table. If that was misunderstood, that was my misunderstanding based on what we had done in the past of my notes from maintenance.
So I don't think, Angie, that it needs to come back to the board based upon the last version of the motion that was presented. So historically, when architects bid projects, they include in the bid package the proposed contract to be executed between the school system and the vendor and the contractor. I am assuming, having worked with this architect in the past, that and having done Red Oak with the same architect, that they would have included, was this LS3P or was this, who was the architect?
Berry Building Group.
No, the architect.
Oh, it was,
Oakley and Collier.
Oakley,
yeah,
Oakley,
Oakley
yeah,
County.
that's what I thought.
That's correct.
So, yeah,
And
so having worked with them in the past, that they would have included our form document, which would be the same form document that they included for Red Oak. So it's really just a matter of taking this bid information theoretically and inserting it into our form contract for execution by the vendor. So I think it'd be okay to go ahead and not for this not to come back to the board. I just, historically, what would have been included in this packet of materials, though, would have been that actual contract prepared so that the board could see the form of the agreement. But I think that as long as it includes me looking at it and reviewing it ahead of time, I see no reason that it would come back, because again, it should be our form, which would be similar to what the board has seen before at Red Oak, with simply inserting the information from the bid materials that you did provide to the board. So I think we're okay to proceed.
Okay.
We started this 2 years ago, plus 2 lawyers ago.
Okay, so at, Mr. Malone, so the current vote, can stand without any further revisions, correct?
The motion as revised by Mr. Lamb,
And seconded by, all right, so
I think is acceptable. And I think it was approved, and then we just had some conversation after the approval, if I've been following this.
But I want to make sure that if the board is not comfortable with this process, I want to make sure you're comfortable with this. But I do think that we have done due diligence in that 2 years, and I understand what Mr. Malone is saying, but I want to make sure you feel comfortable in what we're about to move forward with. Same as with Mr. Hill and the budget. If Mr. Evans is not comfortable with this, if we have to back up, we back up. We're just telling you, we have presented this based on everything we've done. We've shared everything with the board. We had the open bids, you invited me. I don't want to think we're hiding anything from you. So, but if you're comfortable, if you're not, you vote no. And we move forward. That's all I want to say.
Do you have the booklets that the builders have submitted?
I'm assuming we have all that from the last bidding process, I believe, which
yeah,
is.
I would need to locate those, but yes, sir. There was quite a few here for the bid opening, and the packets were all put together. I may still have a copy of all of them. If not, I know that there was a large party here, so I'm sure it's at our maintenance office.
Yeah, I'd love to see them. We didn't get them like we did for the school.
all right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's go ahead and conduct the final roll call vote for this matter. Board Member Dunton,
Yes.
Thomas Bullock, Board Member Lamb,
Yes.
Board Member Sharp, Board Member Jenkins,
Yes.
That was a yes for Sharp.
Board Member Edwards,
Nope.
Board Member Gray, Board Member E. Bullock,
Yeah.
Board Member Chavis,
Yes.
Board Member Bissett,
Yes.
and I'm a no. Motion carried. All right, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Before we go into closed session, I was just going to ask either through Bill and his committee or through the superintendent that we continue to move forward with the playground options, that we would have that in committee at our set.
Can we speak into the mic, please?
Can't hear.
Just requesting that we have
Thank you.
playground options for committee meeting and for our August committee meetings.
I can share with you some information, some updated information that we have found out currently, even minutes before we came in here. Mr. Hale had met with our auditors, and we're going to be able to use some current expense money for some of the playgrounds. And with the board chair moving forward, possibly asking or having a conversation with our county commissioners to be sure that the current expense money can be spent in this way. And then it can be used as, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hale, but it'll be per the auditors, we can use our local current expense money for playgrounds.
Which means in our August retreat, we should have probably two or three options for which.
Thank you very much.
I make a motion to go into.
Are you ready, Madam Chair?
I make a motion that we go into closed session pursuant to general statute 143-318.11 A1, A3, and A6 to prevent the disclosure of confidential personnel files under general statute 115C-321 and consider matters relating to initial employment of an individual employee to prevent the disclosure of confidential student records under general statute 115C-402 and to consult with the board's attorney in order to preserve the attorney privilege.
Is there a second?
Second, since I didn't have to read it.
Motion was made by board member Denton, seconded by Dr. Chavis. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Dunton.
Yes.
Thomas Bullock. Lamb.
Yes.
Sharp. Jenkins. Edwards.
Edwards is yes.
Gray. E. Bullock.
Yes.
Dr. Chavis.
Yes.
Bissett.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Well, now I'm going to close session.
That's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna stay here.